I believe we are live.
Okay, perfect. Welcome to the Baseball Insiders Prospect Show. I am Adam Weinrib, joined by Eric Cole, our prospect guru, and we appreciate everybody who's joining us today who may or may not have been here for the first edition on Facebook, but we are now live on YouTube. Welcome to the show, and Eric, it is Prospect Week.
It is Prospect Week, and it's a time for us to look at what the organizations have how things have settled after the trade deadline, promotions. We'll see some September call-ups. We'll see some call-ups now that rookie eligibility isn't necessarily concerned, but not a lot. A lot more just movement that happens within the minor league system. And again, it's a kind of a chance for us to take a breath and look at kind of what's going on with the systems and see where they all rank up. So I really enjoy this time of year where all these like re-ranks come out and we get a bunch of new information.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody joining us. The MLB Pipeline list, of course, updated with the draftees this week. They've officially hit the list. The list is shifting, and some big names who you were all excited to see have moved on up. But again, the draftees, some of them popping into that top 20, top 30. We'll be talking about the people we had our eyes on most heading into the final stretch. Robert Murray and I will be live again here on the channel tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. So join us for that as we are scaling back slightly, heading towards the weird part of the baseball season and the end of the year. Playoff push into October. We're going to be live plenty during the big time, off-season, bubbling, rising. The tide is hitting us during the heat of November, December. But for now, it's prospect season, and we appreciate everyone who joined us. Subscribe to the Moonshot if you have not. That's Fansided's weekly email newsletter where the Fansided MLB team, including Robert Murray and Eric and myself, usually break down all the biggest stories in the big leagues with humor, insight, behind-the-scenes info. You can also read all that and more on the Baseball Insiders feed on fansided.com. That's fansided.com/baseball-insiders for Eric's content that accompanies the Prospect Show, my weird content, and Robert Murray's Insider Scoops. Now, let's head right to the list. Notable rankings and debuts in the new Pipeline list. Ethan Holliday at 17, Eli Willits at 18. In case you had questions about the Nationals pick, we all did. There's a little one to, flip those names. Maybe you get to the consensus. Kade in there at 22, Seth Hernandez in at 27. What was the most notable debut ranking in your eyes?
So this is tough, right? Because there's a lot of guys that we like a lot, and we just assume we're probably going to be like Luis Pena's example, where like there's been so much hype around him with the Brewers. He was going to make it on lists, but he got put pretty high, right? So is worth kind of shouting out. But for me, the Seth Hernandez's ranking is pretty interesting to me. I in the article I put out, I mentioned the Willits because I did think it was funny that the Pipeline had him as their 5th ranked draft prospect and now have him the 2nd highest ranked guy coming out of the draft. But at the same time, getting picked number 1 overall certainly has its perks. But in Seth Hernandez, a lot of people thought he was the most talented player in the draft, and to see a prep righty getting like just thrown right into the top 30 speaks a lot to kind of how much talent this kid has. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had ranked higher. But at the same time, in terms of guys that I'm like, okay, clearly the industry is very still on this guy, that he didn't take it taken as highly as maybe some thought he would. There's not anything wrong with him. If he is right now, he has the type of stuff and repertoire that in a year's time, being ranked this highly as a debut in the top 100 might look soft. Like he's a guy who could very easily be a top 5 or even number 1 overall prospect in baseball. He's that kind of special talent, assuming it all works out.
Yeah, we roasted the Seth Hernandez pick at the time just because, a lot of bats on the table for the Pirates and a system that needs an infusion of those. But once the dust settled, I think everyone was pretty aligned that, they did get somebody very special here, regardless of how well he fits into the prescribed hierarchy of Pirates needs that we had all put together outside the organization. They said, let's just get this extremely special kid who some agree has one of the best prep arsenals we've ever seen, a Josh Beckett for the modern era, and the rankings reflect that. Anybody else, let's say non-drafty edition, we can include everybody, the Payton Tolles of the world, the risers from throughout the game. Anyone you expected to see rank higher than they actually were when the dust settled on this newfound debut. I know Yankee fans, Spencer Jones, you're probably going to have to be happy with 92. Guys, I don't know if he's getting much higher than that. But anybody else who you said, okay, that's I see the hype. They see the hype, but that's still a little low.
I mean, honestly, Jones would probably have been my pick. Just because the numbers are so loud. I'm not saying he would have been like a top 25 guy, but I'm kind of surprised he didn't slot in somewhere in the 50s. Just because, again, when you're talking about the tools and the upside, that gets a lot of mention. The one that I was like gonna been the one ranking that I was certain of, and you were probably certain of as well, is that Connor Griffin's the number 1 overall prospect in baseball, and clearly they figured that out. He is very, very good. Special talent. Until he proves otherwise, he is the number 1 prospect in baseball. Beyond that, I mean, again, Benj is another guy that, I mean, he got put in at 20, so it's not like he was slighted by any stretch of the imagination. But like the hit tool's been so good, he's already a AAA. Maybe he could have been a touch higher. Based on the amount of noise around him, George Lombard Jr. is another name. Again, he got a nice bump, but scouts just seem to love this kid, and I was surprised that kind of maybe he didn't get a little bit more of a bump, but the numbers might have held him back a bit there. But I think that they mostly got it right. The right guys got bumps. You see like big jumps from Zaire Hope. You see big jumps from Jesus Mate, which should have happened. Like a lot of the names that we have talked about on this show a lot as like rising talents. Jonah Tong's another example of a guy who just kind of went from nowhere and all of a sudden became like a top 50 prospect in baseball. These are the names that they generally got right. Is there going to be a little bit of prospect fatigue with some guys? Yeah, and I think that Pipeline had 10 or 12 guys fall out of the top 100. But when you're bringing this many draftees and you just have between injuries and guys that have just fallen off, you're going to have some of that attrition. But overall, I think they got pretty close to right on this one.
In addition to DePaul and Hope both being in that 20 range, 12 and 19, don't think I missed Mike Sirota, who just debuted on the top 100 after going from Cincinnati to LA in the Gavin Lux trade, going all the way up to 66. I didn't miss that. That rise did not escape my purview. Spencer Jones ahead of Hygen Smith. The comments are acting like that's a bad thing. I don't know. I mean, I feel like at this point that's a ranking a shuffle that you have to make. Is that it's might be jarring based on the way Jones has been slandered and Smith's pedigree, but that feels right to me right now. Is that not right?
I mean, they're two very flawed but different players.
I'm asking you to rank an erratic lefty against like a Joey.
Yeah, a guy who got sent back to extended spring to kind of work on his mechanics and has potential injury issues, and then Spencer Jones, who like sometimes looks like the next coming of Mickey Mantle and sometimes looks like the next coming of Joey Votto. And I don't really know what to make of that profile in terms of ranking against each other as prospects in a lot of ways. But I do think that maybe putting some sort of emphasis on upside makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's obviously, we've got our eyes on the White Sox system and your boy Braden Montgomery all the way up to 31. 33, even better. It's Sal Stewart who's at 31. So that should be comforting, but Smith's luster and Jones's rise this year, while we all sort of try to reckon with whatever his package means, it does make sense to me that is the current order of operations. Any other big time movers? Now, we're not talking about the people who've risen into the top 10, 20, but Tolle stands out. I know we're going to mention him in a bit. Anyone else who you want to talk about who you're surprised to say, okay, that's a bigger jump than I anticipated?
I was a little surprised that Nolan McLean got as much of a bump as he did. I'm not overly overwhelmed by his stuff per se.
37, yeah. I mean, among the Mets who just got bumped to AAA, there was just a mass exodus from Binghamton to Syracuse for the Mets, presumably because they can't hit Elmer Rodriguez-Cruz twice in 1 week and they're frustrated, so they all decided to go up there. But yeah, McLean and Jet and all those guys now heading to the highest level.
Yeah, and again, it's not just the guys who made debuts. Like, for example, a little bit surprised to see Arjun Namala might make it all the way to 51. I like him a lot, but maybe that's a bit of a bigger jump than I would have thought. Franklin Arias is another name. I know that there's a lot of scouts who like him a lot, but he got a 50 spot bump. And again, I like the talent there, but at the same time, maybe that I probably would have had him a little bit lower. I'd have to really kind of sit down and think about it, though, because it's easy to say I would have had this number on a guy, but once you start putting all the names on a sheet of paper, you start realizing, okay, actually, I probably would have him a little bit above these three guys, and that puts him in a ranking I didn't expect. So at the same time, like I think that Pipeline got it pretty close, but there's some of the jumps I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I was happy to see CJ Kefas get a little bit of love at the back end of the top 100. He's very much a simple creature, but at the same time, one that I enjoy watching.
And is up in the big leagues, responsible in part for this Guardian surge. You look at the people who were most excited about the team-specific re-ranks. I think Guardians fans were right up there. That is a deep top 30, an impressive core. And guys like Jace Laviolette comes in at like number. I think he's a draft steal. I think he's a guy you have to go to that range. But to think of him as he's my 8th best prospect. I mean, that's a good spot to be in. Like your system isn't relying on Laviolette, but also right outside that upper echelon, you just have a guy who was the, consensus number 1 pick entering the college season, hanging out in your system. Not bad. Which brings me to Travis Bazzana, who, so the Guardians have like a negative run differential. Their closer is under gambling investigation. Not sure how they got here after selling off pieces at the deadline, but holding Stephen Kwan. But they did. They're a game out of the wild card and tied with the Yankees, who've been terrible for 2 months. In the loss column, Bazzana, a riser on this list, all the way up to 15 at AAA, called up last week. It's a leap, right? We're asking for a lot here, but what are the odds that he actually does impact this playoff race when rosters expand in September?
I put it at maybe 20%. Here's a couple problems, right? You're absolutely right. The Guardians are in it somehow. Against all odds, they are in the playoff race. Right?
And I don't even know if they want to be, but they are.
Yeah, I think that ideally they're like, hey, we actually would prefer to pick a little bit higher in next year's draft and then try to go for it next year. But at the same time, they are in it. They need offense for sure, especially given some of the pieces that they've moved. But this is also a team that is notoriously, they don't want to use minor league options when they don't have to. They don't want to start any guys' clocks unless they have to. And more importantly, Bazzana, I understand he keeps getting moved up, but he hasn't been playing all that great, right? Like, he's hitting 240 in the month of August. Is that really the guy that's screaming, promote me to the big leagues the year after I get drafted? Again, I know that it's been in vogue this year. I mean, you see what Nick Kurtz has done. You've seen what, Jack Caglione can be. There are guys who have been promoted pretty quickly. Christian Moore's another example, except before he got hurt. These are guys that can impact their big league teams relatively quickly, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to waste him in a playoff race that you're kind of a fringe contender anyway. Like, are you really going to call up and start his clock to lose a wild card series this year, which seems pretty likely to me, given who they'd be up against? I would love Cleveland actually having, as much as I make fun of my, Guardians fan friends that for, their fandoms and how much suffering they've been through, it would be great for the city of Cleveland, I think, to have a team worth cheering for. But I just don't think that making that move is all likely, given the Guardians' track record more than anything else. I think that they might call him up early next year. And if that's the case, then that's a team that's going to be really fun to watch. But I just don't think he's pushing hard enough to make them make that choice.
Yeah, and I think at this juncture that is fine, but wanted to get your take on it and appreciate you weighing in. Where is Jacob Marcy? I mean, dominating the major league level, which is where you want to be. You'd rather be there than be on the prospect list. So he is showing MLB Pipeline he deserves more respect every day for the way more fun than they should be Miami Marlins. Gonna get to a couple questions before we head into the risers and followers. Just, do you think guys like Hope and DePaula, who we mentioned last year, stay in high A all year and start in double A next year? My guess would be yes. I don't see any reason to rush these people or give them an early bump, but what are you thinking here?
So organizations seem to have two schools of thought on this. They like to give guys a little bit of a challenge towards the end of the year just to kind of see where they are and see how they react to it. While others are just like, why would we just uproot a guy and send him to a different city to be on a team to play there for 10 games or something like that and then call it a day? So my hunch is that probably not. It'd be a little different if you were putting guys in a position to be close to being called up to the big leagues, but I don't think high A to double A is going to be that push, particularly for those two guys specifically. I could see both of these guys competing for a roster spot in spring training next year, though.
And our friend RG, Red Sox 18, Justinson Garcia call up this season. He is a favorite of this podcast. If he's playing first base, it makes a lot of sense. The Abraham Toro experience may be coming to a rickety close, although he homered yesterday, because of course he did, because every time you start talking about a Red Sox who should maybe get de-emphasized or lose their job, they hit 3 homers in a week. But Garcia at first could be a game changer, especially long-term, especially next year when we know this job will not be handed back to Tristan Casas, and Tristan Casas may not be ready to grab it. So my inclination is next year, not September, but I don't know. What are you thinking?
I think it's theoretically possible, but there's nothing that Greg Breslow does screams that that's something that he would do. I'm not even sure he likes this team, if I'm just being honest about it. I think they're succeeding almost despite themselves in a lot of ways. If they're close enough at the beginning of September to where if they really feel like they really need somebody else at first base to get into the playoffs, then maybe you give the nod to Garcia. But I just don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to be next year.
Yeah, but I think the first base reps put himself firmly in the mix. It's the one area where the Red Sox depth chart is not confusing. Apologies to Tristan Casas, but right now they need help there. If you can provide it, you're going to go there. So if you're an outfielder with the Red Sox, I am sorry. But if you're a first baseman, the path is somewhat cleared, unless they show faith in Casas. But I would suspect you don't want to sell low, but maybe we're going to make some movement there, and a job is up for grabs. All right, let's go to the risers and fallers. And this week's fallers include a name who rose up Pipeline's list. But let's go with the hottest trio of the week first.
Yeah, a fun grouping of names this week. Again, it would have been easy to pick a name like, names that we've talked about before. Connor Griffin had another great week. A lot of the names we've talked about. But I wanted to give a shout out to Thomas White. Had a really good start last week. Struck out 9 batters over 6 innings. Only gave up 1 hit, no walks. A pitching prospect that I think we probably need to give a little bit more credit to in the future. He's just one of those guys who continues to impress. And despite being, relatively under the radar in that system where you have guys like Bubba Chandler getting a lot of the headlines, he's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on, and he looked really good last week. Yankees prospect, mainly just because Adam's my boss, and I want to make sure that I'm giving proper love to the Yankees if possible. Elmer Rodriguez-Cruz made 2 starts last week, 13 innings pitched, only gave up 5 hits total, 4 walks total, and 15 strikeouts, which is pretty much all you can really ask for from a guy when there's no runs involved. And then the last one is the Rangers, Abimelec Ortiz. We've talked a bit about him before. Kind of a fascinating prospect in terms of like a bit streaky, but when he is on, he's really on. And last week he was very much on. Went 8 for 16 last week, scored 8 runs, hit 4 home runs, 13 RBIs, 2 walks against 4 strikeouts. Again, fun bat to watch for Rangers fans. I know that a lot of people like to talk about Sebastian Walcott and some of the young guys at the big league level, but Ortiz is another game to keep an eye on.
Elmer Rodriguez-Cruz also did it against the Rummel Ponies twice. He matched up with Jonah Tong twice. He threw shutties twice. So I learned this week that he is someone I'm more enthusiastic about every time he starts. Very interesting whip, arm motion, tall, lanky righty with good stuff, despite what TJ Stats says or whatever. And the other thing I learned is that Red Sox fans remain utterly humorless because I posted that Carlos Narvaez is hitting 191 over the last month, and no Red Sox fan has mentioned this trade in a while. And then they were all like, Rodriguez-Cruz is in Double-A. You can't genuinely be saying the Red Sox win in a landslide. Guys, we're doing jokes, okay? We're doing little goofs. And also, sometimes you have to give to get in trades. It would actually not be the worst thing in the world if both sides got a valuable piece. The Red Sox needed a catcher. The Yankees had a catching logjam. And if Austin Wells didn't suck, this wouldn't look like quite so lopsided a trade. But I do think ERC is a valuable piece. And I think Yankee fans are happy with their return. And if Narvaez's knee is bothering him, and we may have already seen the best from him this year, he's looking a little bit more like a really good defender, bat questionable, great backup lately rather than a franchise catcher. Just saying, we have yet to decide where this trade lands. But I had a lot of Red Sox fans in my mentions yesterday off of basically a tongue-in-cheek tweet, a 30-game sample size. Obviously, we're not waving the flag. But one of them said to me that there was only like one Red Sox fan on Twitter who was obsessed with the Yankees. And I want to congratulate that guy on having smart friends. But I promise you, that is not true, man. That is not true at all. He was like, all of my feed is Red Sox Twitter, and none of them are talking about the Yankees. Again, I'm glad you have smart friends, but you should take a look outside every once in a while. It's pretty terrifying. Anywho, on to the followers of the week if we want to go viral on Red Sox Twitter again.
Yeah, we'll start with Payton Tolle. Again, a guy who got a lot of love on the prospect rankings because he has risen up the minor league ranks so much this year with the Red Sox. He did make his AAA debut last week. That's great news. Bad news, he got rocked. So not the greatest AAA debut for him, but again, still like the arm. I think he could factor into the Red Sox plans relatively soon. Once you're at AAA, you could just be a phone call away, and it could happen anytime. Although, again, with Breslow, I literally have no idea what his thought process is on any given moment. A couple of hitters. J.J. Wetherholt makes the Fallers list. Again, guy that's in the top 10 prospects of baseball. One of, if not the best hit tool in all of baseball. I'm not worried about him in the slightest. But only had 2 hits last week, and both of them were in the same game. Just not a great game for J.J. Wetherholt. The Cardinals are, going through a little bit of a rework right now, but given kind of how how much better they are than I thought they were going to be this year. I think they're in a position where they could call up a guy like Wetherholt, make a couple moves in the offseason, and actually be really interesting next year. And the other one's Max Clark. Again, another guy who's like sometimes awesome, sometimes not so awesome. He's a prep bat and he's still figuring things out, right? But he still walks a whole bunch. He's hitting like 280 down in the minor leagues. Again, top 10 prospect in baseball. But he had 3 hits all last week, and all of them were singles. So it's not impacting the ball you'd like, but at the same time, he's still getting on base at a good clip. He's still a real threat with his legs. If he starts growing into some more strength and impacting the ball more, he's going to be another one of those guys who is going to be threatening for that number 1 overall spot, assuming that Connor Griffin gets called up in the next 3 years, which I frankly have no confidence in because it's Pittsburgh. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, we just don't know. Uncle Ted, I am a Yankee fan. I'm proud to admit when my players are bad, and Austin Wells sucks. He has like a nerve issue, a circulatory issue in his hand. And he went on record this week saying in an interview that he can't hit sliders anymore. And again, he has an 85 OPS plus. So if that does not suck, then I don't know what sucks. I'm trying to be honest with everybody. Yankee fans have a reputation for fluffing up their own players. I thought he's been really bad. So I hope he becomes good in the future. But for now, quite bad. Eric Cole, we did it. I want to get out of here before I insult any more Red Sox fans or our viewers or anybody attending the show. But I appreciate everybody coming to the stream for the Prospect Show, noon Eastern every Tuesday. We're going to continue doing this through the end of the year and beyond. Robert Murray and I will be back tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern, new time on Wednesdays, because we're sticking to just one show until the stretch run playoffs and the offseason really begins. Read us all on fansided.com/baseball-insiders. Uncle Ted, he's chronically hurt. Which makes him unusable, which makes a player bad. That's bad. It's bad when a player is bad at baseball. My God. Respect. All respect. But he's been bad all year. Eric, you could read us on the Baseball Insiders feed on fansided.com/baseball-insiders. We still got a great stream from Uncle Ted despite me screaming at him, so I guess I'll keep doing that. Eric, thank you for joining me. We'll see you right back here next week.